Hello and welcome to the Black Tower. I am your host, your guide, your brother, the sorcerer, Armand Soul. Coffee with the sorcerer interview with Bill Duvendack. Bill, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
Shit, brother, I'm doing it, man. I've been noticing a lot of the things that you're actually putting out there these days. You know, the astrology and your 418 astrology ascension. Have I got that correct?
Yeah. 14 Ascendant.
Oh yeah. I also like the fact that now you've started doing these like little small group setting things where you sell seats and stuff so that they can get in, so that they can get interaction with you. I think that that's kind of cool on a personal level because, uh, well, first off, it's affordable. Second off, it's because someone like yourself, you've been doing this for what, 30 years?
Yep. Long time.
Holy shit, man.
Yep. I've
Oh,
been playing around with occultism since, wow, a long time.
Oh man, I think one of the coolest things I ever saw was you and Asnoth Mason with the Lucifer Awakening. That was awesome. I like that. What all different?
And it's actually timely that you mention it because on Draco Press in little over a month, we're going to be releasing the softcover version of that book too for people that missed the Become a Living God edition.
Oh hell yeah, I can't wait. Uh, I honestly can't because that definitely would go in my library. Uh, but I brought that up because I want to know, what all kind of different things have you done in the occult?
Pretty much you name it, I've done it in some way, shape, or form. I worked at a metaphysical shop for 15 years, so I got introduced to a lot of the New Age and Ascension teachings. Before that, I was basically solitary ceremonial magic, and now things are just continually evolving at a whole new level in a whole different direction. So it's a lot of my background's in the Golden Dawn and Hermetics and Thelema. So it's very much that approach, but it's applied to really whatever grabs my interest.
Hell yeah, I think that's interesting as hell. That I worked in an occult shop for about a year and a half, 2 years,
Nice.
and it's where I met my wife, which is really really cool because you know. Uh, but with all that though, my beginning was also in ceremonial magic, and it was also the Golden Dawn. So that's very interesting. And I've been doing this for about 23, 24 years. So it started off with learning ceremonial magic, and they really took off in that. And then in about 5 years into it is when I was introduced to Thelema,
Hmm.
with Aleister Crowley, the Book of the Law, and all this, and it really shaped and changed who I was and how I looked at things. Uh,
I completely agree. I was basically the same way. When I got introduced to the Book of the Law and his teachings, it was a profound impact. It really was.
it, I will say this: it shaped and shifted my view on spirit versus living spirit.
Exactly. If you do Thelema right, you live it. It's not something you read and put down and turn your attention elsewhere. It's a state of being.
Yeah. The reason I was bringing up Lucifer Awakening before is that you were going into the somewhere around in that time, you were doing a study on you were introducing the different gods of the Egyptian pantheon, and I was reading through some of that, and I'm like, wow, I cannot imagine the amount of time and dedication and study it took for you to put all this together. Because in this day and age, we run into what we call armchair theorists, where people sit and read books and they just think stuff up and they just throw it out there as if it's truth and law and all this, that, and the other. But I don't get that from your writings at all.
No, and you're correct. I don't share a lot of personal gnosis or the results of rituals. That's never really been something that I've seen as attractive for what I do. I figure if people want to come to their own conclusions or have their own personal gnosis, then they'll do the damn work. So if I put a lot of those little morsels out there, number one, I found over the years that most of mine goes against the grain of what majority of people believe. So right there, I'm setting myself up for a headache. And number two, yeah, it's good to understand someone's personal gnosis to make a personal connection with them, but you can make that connection without revealing what has been given to you from the spirits.
Very, very true. It's like, if I'm not too bad off, I was reading about Lucifer and his different masks and stuff, and how even though you have like a ray or current, whatever the word is that all the cool kids like to use for these different things, uh, and how he has like different masks, different faces, things of that nature, and that's why I really enjoyed your concept of the way you were introducing Egyptian deities, is because it follows the same thought of how, it's like a buildup, kind of like, I guess, Jungian archetypes would work a lot.
Exactly, and that's really the inspiration, not just for Awakening Lucifer, but a lot of the God forms that are out there is that they're Jungian. So what that means is, number one, the connection that you can do with archetypes, but number two, you can take any one kernel and look at it from different perspectives of different pantheons, and it all comes back to the same kernel.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, so you get to see something from multiple facets and multiple perspectives without diminishing the core.
Hell yeah. Uh, I think one of the things is because, like, I work with Lucifer, and every time you hear people say these names, you keep thinking of somebody that has their Baphomet statue, or this, that, or the other, and all these other things, and I'm like, Lucifer is more of a concept to me. Now, this is just me, okay? So, like, you have Lucifer, the deity, the spirit, the entity, and that's a real thing. But instead of, like in this day and age, when they talk about worship, when they talk about working with these deities in a co-creator form, I personally, I don't prefer to worship so much as to emulate these beings. It's kind of like assuming a god form, like we would in Thelema or Golden Dawn.
Well, and it's splitting hairs, really. Yeah, you can co-create with a being without worshiping it. And a lot of people don't make that critical thinking leap to realize that. So you see a lot of people that are very devout in their work, or they approach it from a devotional perspective. But, my roots are showing here. No gods, no masters. There is no part of me that is not of the gods. We're one and the same. The only difference is they've been around longer. Other than that, they shit just like me.
Oh, hell yeah. That fucking amen, dude. Now I got the hairs on my arm crawling, because, man, that, it is so weird to talk to somebody who has similar ideology concerning these different things, uh, because that phrase, there is no part of me that is not of the gods. I use that, and I've used that for like 20 years now in my workings, and so I see them as, I see myself as a gem, the core of myself as a gem, and it's so many
Exactly.
faucets and stuff, and these faucets are symbolized or symbolic of the different faces of all these gods, and we are one and the same and all together. You know, that whole no man is an island thing,
Right, and it's Hermetics 101, as above, so below.
and as within, so without.
Exactly.
Damn right. Dude, this is blowing my mind. I was stumbling over my words earlier when we were first talking and getting started into this, but dude, it is a breath of fresh air to speak with somebody who I'm not sitting there like, okay, I've got to kind of understand where they're coming from so that I can tailor this around. It's so refreshing just to have an open conversation with somebody who we don't have to think alike. We don't even have to feel the same way about things, but we can at least, that's a good common ground to work from.
Exactly, and that's really what's missing in a lot of occultism, which is ironic, is cultivating that middle ground. There's too much mutually exclusive perspectives and confrontational paradigms out there, and it's just like, well, can't we all just get along? I mean, really? We got to come back to the early 90s for that damn phrase just to have a come to Krishna meeting in 2019. Come on, people, find middle ground and work from there. And the reason that I'm adamant about it is just because if you're involved in occultism, you're only in about 10% of the population of the planet. So then from a numbers perspective, it makes absolutely zero sense to have conflict in that 10% because we're all getting screwed in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, it's just the nature of the beast, and the beast being the order that is set upon our earth, upon our plane here. Um, and I think it's so neat that you use an '80s reference. The first thing that came to my mind was, I wish we could buy the world a Coke. You know.
See, exactly. Let's all sing Kumbaya, chant it in our own paradigms, and take away our lessons.
Oh yeah. And but when getting back to the subject of the nature of the beast and the dichotomy of it, that is so strange that you know it's not just based on social order. It's not just based on this order, that order, this, that, and the other. It is a culmination and a combination of all of them. We call these things by different names because we have to classify them, but deep down inside our very core, we're all made of the exact same shit. You cut open
Exactly.
a living human being, and what's coming out? Blood.
Exactly. Exactly. And that should be kept in mind just for the exchange of ideas, if nothing else. We inspire each other, or at least we should.
I wish there was more of that. It's like a lot of what I do on my channel. Like I'll have like different people on here that I'll interview. Hell, I'll even do videos where I'm discussing something. And the concept isn't to give the viewer something to believe in. It is to share an idea or a thought or an experience so that they can then in turn interpret that in their own way and be like, oh, hey, I can relate to this, such and such. Or in some cases, I don't relate to that at all. And that's fine. But the thing is this human experience that we're having, uh, I I abhor the idea that this is what it is, because to me it's not. Uh, this right here is being experienced from a much higher or deeper level, depending on your viewpoint. Uh, I like to think of it as this is the meat puppet, and either deep down inside me or far away in space, there's like this invisible string attached to it, and it's sitting there, dance little puppet dance, or whatever. But it's coming from a higher vibration, and then at the same time, then it has to learn that there's all these other things interacting with it, and all these other energies bombarding it, so forth and so on. Like when we turn on a TV, or we're watching a video, or this, that, or the other, in this human experience, what it does is it declines the intellect. It dims the light of the spirit within. And so I myself, I'm very picky about what I allow my eyes to see if I can help it, and to what
Mhm.
there's here, because I like to control myself, my environment. It's a big story when I step outside. Now that I can't control that. Uh, but the most powerful thing that I've ever found, and I learned this from Thelema. Love is the law. Love under will. And a lot of people, the things they always get caught up on, do as thou wilt. And it's great to do your will, but there's a lot more to that. And there was a lot more said about that. To do your will is great, but to do the will of the one. But then people don't understand what the one is. They don't understand their own God, their own godhood. They don't understand their own authority or kingship, if you will. What are your takes? Because I noticed that when I was reading over the few snippets of parts that I could with Lucifer Awakening, I noticed that you had deeper thoughts that I don't know if it was the fact that you were trying to stick to the subject, didn't have a chance to unravel more of the mystery with it. But I was wondering, what is your take as from a Luciferian aspect, as a light bearer, not as some big boogeyman that's left hand path craze of the day thing.
Well, the main thing is that 3D physical reality that we live in is based on polarity. So the energy generated by conflict can be used to further our own agendas. So what you get a lot of times is people get hung up on doing their will. And I remember 15 years ago, you still had to clarify to people, do what thou wilt does not mean do what you want. But I've noticed over the last several years that that is less and less something you have to correct people on. More and more people are understanding that doing your will is will with a capital W. Now, the problem is that people think it's some sort of gut check, or I know my will, I'm going to do it, I'm going to charge through every obstacle that comes my way, I'm going to put blinders on, I'm going to put the full force in my consciousness and try and blow a hole in reality to actualize my will. And that is a result of the amount of time people spend developing their will and making that connection with the Praetor human intelligence. Okay, I get where it comes from, but the problem is not everything is settled through brute strength. I think it was the Dalai Lama has a great quote, which says, when you're trapped in a tent when you're naked, trapped in a tent with a mosquito and it lands on your testicles, you realize that not every problem is solved through violence.
Hell yeah, man. Hell
And
yeah.
so people lose sight of the fact that your will should be fluid. A fluid will does not equate with a weak will. As a matter of fact, it proves Darwin correct that it's the most adaptable of the species that survives, not the strongest. So people get hung up, they focus their will on it, and it's kind of like a bull in a china shop going full force, actualizing their will, when in reality, it'd probably be easier if they go around the hurdles or through the hurdles. You know, Crowley talked extensively about the fact that if you're doing your will, you're a star in your own orbit. 90% of the time or more, stars don't collide.
Yeah.
So your will should never bring you in conflict, or almost never bring you into conflict with someone else. And a lot of people miss that. And the way to temper it, to make sure that you don't come into conflict with someone else, is through the law of love.
Yeah. It's through that higher vibration. I am so happy that you actually, you're expanding on this, because there's so few people I can actually have a conversation like this with, concerning will, as in true will, so forth and so on, and the degree in which we're speaking of it, not about it, but of it. Uh, I noticed that we are born with a will, with a divine will, whatever infernal divine, whatever the word is that these people want to apply it to. I know we live in a polar world, but I'm not a polarity guy. I don't play the game. It's the whole, are you right hand or left hand? I'm like, well, I write with my right hand, but I have two hands, and they both do something, and they work together, not against one another.
Well, and you're hitting the important point. When you work with your will long enough, you shift your consciousness above polarity thinking.
Yeah.
Just because we're in a polarity-based world does not mean we have to be internally polarized.
Exactly. The whole gist of it, or the nutshell that I was trying to create for what we're saying or what we're discussing, is so my thought is on this, that we're all born with this will, and throughout life we have experiences, whether it's our upbringing, whether it's traditions that are programmed in us, and all this other stuff. And then later in life, when we actually have a choice or a decision of whether to remove that which no longer serves us, and so forth and so on. And we do all these rites. We do these, what are they called? Initiations, if you will. And we do all these workings. And what it is that we are doing an alchemical work of removing, cleansing. We're doing the decay, the dissolving, all this. And we're removing all these things. And then once we've made it cleaned and pure, then we are building upon it. And the whole process, and this is why I love the death current, because the death current allows us to be able to constantly remove all the stuff that's trying to stick to us. We do not have to be conscious, in my opinion, of our will. Our will is accomplished daily, one way or another. We just don't realize this. Uh, and keeping that in mind, when we do all these initiations and we do all these workings and things, what we're doing is we're purifying everything about ourselves so that our will is more finely attuned and so that our actions begin to follow it. Because it took me years of meditation and just actualization and realization of what is true will, what is will itself. There is for lack of better words, I love the left hand path's workings with creating a stronger will, a will like iron. But at the same time, I also believe in the right hand path of which creates an equilibrium or a balance of being as soft and gentle as rain, you know. And so water and metal, yeah, they don't really mix, but what happens? There's an oxidization that occurs, and there's the decaying act or the decaying effect in action that occurs with it. And that's why I think that the two symbolisms there are very important, because if you take into account the temperance card of the tarot, that is what it actually represents. It represents the knowing of the polarity itself. But instead of focusing on just, oh, this is all left hand and this is all right hand, and in that polarity, instead of sticking to that concept, you have to break past it, and you have to realize that all things have their opposite. But the idea is to join them, combine them, and I think that that's the secret of the temperance card for myself. And I use that symbolism in my own personal belief system, and then I put it into practice in my own rights. What do you do like that? Like I might use something like that. What do you do?
Well, it's more or less the same way. I take from wherever the hell I want to take from and do with it what I will.
Hell
You
yeah.
know, and the phrases that go through my mind on a regular basis is there's the sword and the serpent. There's the serpent and the dove. You've got these things that are mirrored on the two paths, and only through unity and seeing how they work together can you transcend
Yeah.
a lot of the garbage occultism of the last 2,000 years that had to do with falling prostrate to a real bastard of a god.
Yeah.
So in order to come out of those 2,000 years of species conditioning, we now stand at the precipice where we've got to take from both, because to deny both or one or the other is to intentionally cut off the power that's there for you. We've got to take from both, merge it within ourselves, transmute it, separate the dross and the iniquities, and then transcend it into a new, higher level, unified state of consciousness.
Oh yeah.
It's easier said than done, but that's all right. Crowley had a real good quote that personally I think more people should know about. Learn first what work is. The great work is not far behind.
Yeah.
If you got a shitty work ethic, you're not going to have an easy time actualizing your will. If you've got a strong work ethic, then it's going to be easier. But as soon as you develop your work ethic, just understand that that was like the 101 stuff.
Yeah.
Because then you got to step it up.
Hell yeah. They call it validation. A lot of the things like that you've been saying, I present it in the exact same way. It's like, how can you call upon a spirit and think that it's going to do a fucking thing for you if you yourself aren't going to do a fucking thing for yourself? And pardon the F bombs, but sometimes certain things, I have a potty mouth, man. I can't help it.
Well, that's reflected in the Judeo-Christian Bible. God helps those who help themselves.
Yep.
You want help? Crowley gives a story, I think it's in he and Mather's translation of the Goetia, where he says one of the most powerful invocations he did was to Tapthartharus, the intelligence of Mercury. And the way he did it, he picked up a phone and called a printer. Genius. Exactly.
Yeah.
You want some, oh my God, super powerful results? Make the connection in society.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do. Don't sit on your hands and wait for it to happen, because it's not going to.
Yeah. I employ a lot of wheel building tools uh, in my toolbox. I use a lot of them in ritual and just mundane life. I just in general, because if you build the wheel, then then have the will to go about doing the physical things that you need to do to take care of your own business and your own well-being. And then at the same time, when you develop those two things, the third thing that happens is that you tend to be a more powerful person independently on your own. And the effects of it in magic, it's fucking astounding. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing, instead of seeing the imperfect image like you would in a mirror, it's like looking in a cosmic mirror where it's a perfect reflection. And I say that in a lot of my videos, and I've done this work, and it's in my own workings and my own writings, that whatever you create within your internal self, the universe has no choice but to mimic it most perfectly. That's the as above, so below, as within, so without. When you know these things about yourself, when you've got them built, when you've got them in place, when you've put them into action, uh, like you can't expect to get a job sitting there on your butt, never making phone calls, never doing anything. Okay, the work ethic, like you were talking about, Uh, so what do? You pick up a phone, you go out there, you do what you have to do. Magic isn't supposed to be there to bring it all to you, and you just sit back and just take it easy. Magic is made to supplement your physical actions. They're made to walk hand in hand because they are one and the same. And when they hear me say that, they think of it as if it's two different things. They think of it that it's the physical and then the spiritual or mental, whatever you want to call it. But it's not. They're one and the same. They're like having two hands. Holding.
Well, and what's funny about that is that idea is still fairly new. It's only about 2,000 years old. In ancient Egypt, if you asked a commoner what is magic, they would look at you strange and they wouldn't understand, because magic was everyday life.
Yeah.
And the same way with the Sumerians. The idea that magic is intrinsically tied to everything is an older idea than the idea that it's separate from any one thing.
Indeed, indeed. You know, I I can't help but notice, like, I've been watching your YouTube channel, and I especially love your astrology videos where you're actually explaining and all this other stuff. Even the things you start doing on Facebook where you're putting out the tidbits of the day, which I appreciate you doing that, by the way, because that means a lot to me. Because personally, astrology is not my strong suit. It's something I need to work on my knowledge of, and so forth and so on. And I've been doing that in my own way, in my own mystical practice, and intellectually, reading on things, studying, asking questions to people who know these things. Uh, and with that in mind, I want to kind of shift this conversation, if we can, into astrology. It is more than just, oh, look, pretty lights up in the sky at night, which they're beautiful. Don't get me wrong. And but these lights and their design and their shapes and everything, whether they actually are cosmically in the shape or a form of a ram or a dragon or a lion or whatever. The point of the matter is that it created myth within mankind. It was their connection to their gods. They all of a sudden, so when people think of gods, when the ancient people thought of gods, they were thinking of fire, of wind, of water, the things that affected them day to day. But then when they started actually having like concepts of other gods, of ancient gods, old gods, they were talking about the stars and the sky and the shapes and forms. I would really love if you would just give us something here. Just what is your take on this as an astrologer? What's your
Well, so I've got a cynical streak. And I say that because I've got a real simple way of looking at that. If you look at the constellations from the zodiac, just the straight up constellations that are used in astrology, you find yourself looking at stars And unless the lines are drawn in to show how they relate to that animal, you look at them and you're like, I got no fucking clue what this is.
Yeah,
The cynical part comes in because I'm pretty sure it was a bunch of old, probably men, tripping balls on mushrooms or DMT, laying in a field, staring up, and coming to the conclusion that this looks like that while they're high out of their flipping minds. And then all of a sudden it became rote, it became foundational, and everybody adhered to it. Because when you look up at those stars, you don't see those same damn patterns.
yeah.
And I say this because in order to understand the stars and the patterns of the signs, we have to think outside the box. A lot of people think astrology is a hard science, but it's not. It's a soft science, much like anthropology, archaeology, meteorology, biology. Any of the ologies are soft sciences. What that means is there's firm principles, but they're still open to interpretation. And that's what hangs a lot of people up, is they think if I memorize these correspondences, I understand astrology. Well, no, you don't. You understand the correspondences. Now you've got to see how they're at work in your life fluidly on a day-to-day basis. That's where the challenge comes in.
You know, I noticed things like I think some of the constellations, they make sense, and not because I was raised, you know, because my adoptive father, when I was a kid, you know, he had a telescope, and you know, and he'd sit there and he'd show us the constellations, you know, and have us memorize their names and so forth and so on. So now the information about, you know, when is this sign in the sky and stuff like that, you know, he didn't know any of that. He just knew constellations and their names and what they look like and all this other stuff. There were very few of them that in my mind's eye actually looked like they were supposed to look. Like, for example, the Scorpio. Now, I personally, I can see the scorpion because I can make out its, you know, its arms and its tail. It's perfect. You can see it. Uh, Orion is probably my favorite, and the reason why is because in my system, uh, the Simon Necronomicon and through its workings, it actually represents. And I'm not your base reader. I don't just read something and like take it for what it is. I actually understand the system itself and I know what it is. But the thing is that a lot of it, a lot out of that book has to do with agriculture. Has a lot to do with agriculture. Has a lot to do with these people, these ancient people, where they came up with their belief systems, where they come up with their signs and things, was all based on agriculture. The funny thing about Orion is that in Paleolithic times, they're saying that you know it represented the hunter, which maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Who the hell knows? I wasn't around in the Paleolithic era. I can't tell you. But I can tell you this much. In my system, if you're calling upon the Watcher, you're calling upon a mark. If you're calling upon any type of uh, protector or warrior spirit, that is the go-to constellation. You can literally, I don't care what system you're working out of, you can use that constellation perfectly. Me, myself, and I refer to it as the great guardian god of the heavens. And then the next thing I know, you know, it's perfect in my workings. Simon Necronomicon says, I've set a good God over your head, you know, like unto a kindly watcher. Holy shit, you know, so it all fit in with me. But, you know, there are certain signs I'm sitting there going, I don't see it. I really don't see it. I've seen signs and symbols in the skies of stars and planets and all this other stuff make certain symbols. At certain times of the year, they'll make a certain symbol, but they're not in any book I've ever read. They're not in any star chart I've ever seen. And I'm like, well, am I seeing shit? You know, what's going on with that? And then it goes
Probably, but then that means you're in line with all the guys that created this in the first place.
right. And then I also think of it this way, maybe, just maybe, what they call star signs and constellations and all these different elements or whatever, uh, these archetype symbols and things, because through seals and symbols or powers awakened and reawakened. Well, maybe in just a small way, maybe every man and every woman being a star has within their own self a set of symbols that in the sky are powerful for them. And it's not actually like all the books are trying to teach us. It's not really like, oh, this means, blah, 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 the outside the 4 times of year when the seasons change. Because a lot of magic that they call ancient and old, they were no different than in this day and age where it's all about how do I get from one day to the next? How do I survive this day? What do I do this day to provide for more days to come? So forth and so on, keep it running. So it's no different. But you as an astrologer, what do you get out? What do you personally, you build? What do you get out of all of it that you actually harnessed and worked in your own stuff in your own system and belief?
Well, so what I get out of it is just the satisfaction of being able to translate astrology for regular applicable use. You know, one of the problems with astrology that I ran into when I was first learning it is if you talk to astrologers for any extended period of time, eventually they kind of run at the mouth on tangents and they fall into a lot of technical talk. And it's almost like they forget that you're there. Now, the first time it happened, I was blown away because it seemed rude. But the more it happened, the more I realized they were just kids in a candy store. They were talking about their favorite thing and they got lost in the moment. But that happened to me enough where it left me the idea to be careful not to do that with other people. So when I write my daily horoscopes on my 418 Ascendant Facebook page and Instagram, or when I do my monthly horoscopes on my website, I'm always looking at the practical application to better your life and get you through to the next day. So I treat it very similar to weather reports. Here's what's going on in the sky. You're in charge of your reaction to it.
Yeah. Well, it's like I don't remember if it was I think it was early morning when I read your post on Facebook where you're talking about the day being a good day for communication. And I about laughed because we have had this set up and I was like, I wonder if he knew that when we set this up or
Oh, I did. That's why I wanted us to record it on a Wednesday. Wednesday's ruled by Mercury. It's
Mercury.
the day of communication.
Hell yeah. And so, that was unique and I have deep respect for people who connect mundane things with something so high and lofty and above them, so to speak, because
Well, you,
they
you
that
got
makes
to.
people.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah,
It's the only way to get anything bigger.
yeah. How many books have you published or authored or whatever?
Let's see. 8 books, and I think over 2 dozen essays. And that's not counting different articles. Like I write a column for the Dolman Grove Chronicles. I'm doing a blog on Savannah East right now on esoteric astrology, little pieces like that. But yeah, the 8th book just came out last year. It was the second Enochian grimoire. And then I've got at least 3 more scheduled for this year.
Wow. So isn't it really you're working on any Enochian grimoire?
I just put out a second volume to it with Sirius Esoteric Publishing with Edgar Curval. And volume 1 was a system that we found that nobody else had discovered. And volume 2 were the experiences of the group that worked through the system.
Wow, I have so got to check that out because
They're not beginner astrology books, but they're pretty interesting.
I like Enochian, man. It works.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, it does. It's pretty amazing too. The system we found has been undiscovered for the last 420 years. So we just found it and we put it to work for us.
Well, I think that's neat that you brought that up on here because this is literally the first time I'm hearing about this. I had no idea that you had a book on that you'd worked on that. You know, and Edgar to me seems like one of those people who really knows whatever it is he does or he knows. Like that would be the guy I'd want having my back in magical workings because I mean he's just got that feel about him. Uh, do you work? Do you do Enochian workings yourself? I mean, what kind of
So the two books were the result of a Enochian group that took 3 years to explore the Enochian material. Most of the group had zero background in Enochian. Now, because of my Golden Dawn background in ceremonial magic, I've worked with Enochian fairly extensively in the past. I've got some classes that eventually will make it over to digital too. So when we went through it, it was kind of nice because it was a bunch of people that went into it without any preconceived notions. You know, I love Enochian. I've worked with it off and on for the better part of probably close to 20 years. It's absolutely fantastic. But here again, if you're a beginner, getting into it is kind of hard to do. You've got Lon Duquette's Enochian vision magic, which is great for scrying the aethers. But as far as looking at the system as its own self-contained system, no one's really gone into that yet. And there are plans in the works that I'll go into it later, but it's going to be a little ways off yet.
Yeah.
Because it is a complete system. Most people use it as an adjunct to what they're already doing, but you can use it as a standalone if you go through all the materials, sort it all out, and piece it together. It's just a massive research project if you want to do it.
Yeah. But I know my introduction to Enochian was a little booklet that you could literally put in a pocket, and the angels that I called were quite violent, and I thought that was very strange because one thing I do know is that however you are, whatever vibration and tone you're at, it affects whatever your workings are. But I wasn't in a bad place and I couldn't understand it. And then come to find out, it was because there was a lot more to it than something you could just put in a little bitty chest pocket book. That wasn't all there was to it, you know. And then later on, when I actually, like a year later, finally got the balls up to try it again, only this time I was like, you know, I'm going to do a lot more research than what I did before I purchased that stupid little booklet that, you know, about got my ass handed to me. I'm not going to lie. You know, some of those things, you got to know what you're doing because because you kind of got to think of it as a cube,
Mm-hmm.
a cube world surrounding what is known as the known unknown universe, and these angels are what I refer to as angels in between. And so these travelers, these spirits that work from these different points of being. And so I would definitely suggest to anybody out there that if you're looking into the Enochian, make for certain that you find somebody's writing that actually goes into detail of what it is, what it's about, so forth and so on. Like definitely, Bill, I'm gonna be checking out your stuff on that, man, because I'm not gonna lie, I'd like to see your.
I think on my website there is a digital course that's an intro to Enochian that's on there available. But I'm going to be doing a lot more with it for that very reason.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people jump into it. They don't know what they're doing. They get results like that, and they think, much in the same vein as Anton LaVey, oh, these must be demons. Well, no, you just don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
And everybody's guilty of that, you know. We all jump into the deep end of things.
I have been a lover of all things occult magic for so long, but it was thanks to Enochian that I went to understand that when I'm standing at a quarter and I'm calling a quarter, I'm not just calling that primal element, but I'm also interacting with the mixture of the other elements mixed into it. Because there's no such thing as you have the whole of a thing, but that whole of a thing has so many parts and pieces that are combined with the rest of it. But most people don't think like that. They don't recognize that in their workings. And so it made me think deeper, and it made me have a deeper understanding. And in that deeper understanding and knowing came a deeper love for all things magic, because then I went to understanding that of that whole thing where they're like, a butterfly flaps its wings and a hurricane over there and all this other stuff. Yes, maybe all things are connected and so forth and so on, and maybe not to that drastic of a degree, but if it is so, it is so, and I do not know better, so I don't know, and I won't answer on that. But what I do know is that, with this depth with this richness of all these different traditions and things. You don't necessarily have to cling to one. You need to find your own inner self, know your own self first off. And then when you're working through these things, start to learn the different parts and pieces, not necessarily go crazy trying to understand how it all works, because, they say that the mind of God is unfathomable. I imagine it might be because I haven't discerned all of me yet. So I don't know what the God that I am knows, don't know.
Yep.
But let's go over if we could some of the what are some of the things you're involved in. I mean, like I know you have a YouTube channel.
I've got a YouTube channel. I'm pretty much all over social media like a rash. Facebook has daily horoscopes. I just rolled those out to Instagram too. My website's pretty active with digital courses as well as monthly horoscopes and full moon blog. So there'll be a new one of those coming up soon. Let's see. Draco Press, the new publishing house that I'm doing with Asanoth Mason, that just started last November 26th, I think it was. We've got one book out on there already by Edgar, and Awakening Lucifer is coming out in softcover in February. And then we have another book that's lined up for the next few months too. So we're starting to pop off new releases there. Of course, I'm active with the Temple of Ascending Flame. I'm a Thelemic bishop, so I'll probably be doing something with that in the near future. Right now, it's kind of on hold while I get the rest of this together. We got the books coming up. I'm going to be doing more recorded classes. I'm still doing the in-person classes, and of course, tarot readings. So a little bit of everything, really. And I've tried to scale it back quite a bit over the last couple of years, but that really hasn't worked.
Imagine that, not being able to skim it back. Uh, one thing I would like our viewers to know is like, where all can they find you? What do you actually provide? Because I know you've got like these classes starting and everything. Exactly what all different kinds do you have? Do you have a minute or two to go over that?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of basic magic classes on the website, but in person, usually once or twice a year, I start with a basic astrology class and I take everybody through the basics so that you get a firm grasp on it. And that's kind of what you're seeing on social media, is I do them at a local shop here in St. Louis. But what I'm doing online is I've got a lot of that material already out there, but I'm just gradually adding to it. I was doing webinars for a while, but what I discovered is people wanted the recordings, not necessarily to be there in person. So I'm starting to roll them out as recorded classes instead. And I think those are kind of the highlights right now. The books are scheduled for this year. I've got another book that may or may not come out. There might be some more video courses with Become a Living God, like the Egyptian series that you saw, that are going to be coming out. I've got material in the new Azazel anthology that's out, and I'm also going to have some pieces, have a piece in the Abaddon anthology, as well as the Beelzebub anthology. And then the books that are coming out later this year one is on Clipothic astrology. So it's the first book of its kind that I know of that exclusively focuses on the astrology of the Clipothic tree. Then on Halloween, Asanoth Mason and I are releasing our tarot deck, Oraculum Leviathan, through Become a Living God. And towards the end of the year, I'm going to release my third book with Amanian Press on psychic protection. So those are the ones that are scheduled. Now, to be fair, Oraculum Leviathan and Clipothic astrology are already written. They're in the can, so they're going to come out. I've still got to write the psychic protection book, but otherwise it's just moving ahead with more digital stuff. I'm starting to do more with the YouTube channel. A lot of people are liking that. I'm starting to do more with Instagram. So those are going to continue too. And of course I do astrological charts too.
Hell yeah. See, now I understand why you were such a hard man to pin down for an interview. Now I know, man.
Yep.
You know,
It goes back to that work ethic.
yes, it does. Yes, it does. And you know, and that's amazing. That you think of somebody like yourself, of all the training and the education that you've had to go through just to get to where you're at. You know, that in itself is an example of the work ethic that you actually have and the fruits of labor from that. Because like there's a lot of people who sit there and they look at people who have and have gotten up there and all this other stuff, and they're like, that's where I want to be. They have no idea that until they find within themselves that kind of drive, that momentum, and just sticking with it, doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it. They're not going to get there. Some genie in the bottle is not going to give them success. Like I was working with Belial, and I was talking to him. It's been a few years back, and I was like, help me build my kingdom, help my kingdom, so forth and so on. And it was a really long, drawn out process of learning that well, first things first, strengthen the will. Second thing, there are things that you're going to need to do, whether you want to, don't want to, whether you've got time, don't have time, whatever the thing is. There are things you're going to have to do. I've lost a lot of sleep in the process of everything, and it seems like here in this present day, I'm like extremely busy between getting ready for a surgery, and still trying to put out content and setting this up and setting that up and getting this prepared and that prepared. And so, it's awesome to see somebody who, I'm very certain you have your own stories of things you've had to work through just to get to where you're at right now.
Well, and a lot of people, you kind of hit the nail on the head. A lot of people want something, and I'll get people all the time that ask me, like, what tips do you got or things like that. And it's usually, I give them two stock answers. Number one is, you want what I got, you got to do what I do.
Yeah.
Number two is, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
If you answer those, you figure it out, you make a plan, and you put in the work, it'll come.
Yeah. It
may be 30 years, but it will get there eventually.
Oh, I hear you, man. 24 years down my own personal road. I'd have never thought for 1 second that I'd be doing a YouTube channel. I'm too much of a face-to-face, in person, and it just so happened that it started off as an agreement, a pact I had made, and then after a year and fulfilling up the pact I had made in the agreement, I decided on my own that I would continue, just out of love, because I was like, holy crap, not only did the Spirit say, I want you to do this, but how was I to know that Spirit was, lining me up to do something that I would actually enjoy doing, and that, would actually be fruitful.
Well, if you would have told me 15 years ago, this is what I'd be doing now, I would have laughed in your face and said you're delusional.
That's amazing. You have no idea how many people I've interviewed or talked to that has said the exact same thing there, that of concerning where they're at. They're like, if you'd have asked me, 10 years ago, could I see myself here? It'd been like, you're full of shit.
Right, exactly.
But we're gonna try to wrap this up. It was an honor having you on here first off.
Oh, that's great, man. A lot of fun.
Hell yeah. But second off, for my viewers out there, is there any tidbit of wisdom that you haven't already put out there besides the whole, you want it to work for it? Is there anything you'd like to share?
Trust yourself. To thine own self be true.
Yeah.
Think for yourself, question everything. And then finally, success is your proof. Like you said, it's an adjunct. It should better the quality of your life. Now, that also means we have to be open to the fact that when we're first getting started, it may put us through the ringer because we've got to clean out a lot of stuff that needs to go. But after that turbulent time, it should settle down to where your quality of life improves. So if it's not improving the quality of your life, what the hell are you doing?
For real, right? Designed by desire.
Exactly. I talk about a lot of these tips in the Metaphysics of Magic. They're just beginner tips. Critical thinking is important. don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, really analyze things, get to know the difference between verified personal gnosis and unverified personal gnosis. Understand that if somebody tries to pigeonhole you with something, it's a reflection of their limited consciousness and it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Unless you claim that as a title.
Yeah. That's why I stick with sorcerer.
Right.
To me, it breaks all the molds of what everybody needs, a title for this and a title for that. Fine, I'm a sorcerer.
Right. I'm an occultist.
Yeah. I make do with what I know and I understand. I've built a system around it. I work it. That's all there is to it. It's a wash, rinse, repeat most of the time. Uh, I enjoy having open conversation with intelligent people that actually know things I don't know or look at it from a different perspective. And then we share ideas and suggestions and ideas. This is what brotherhood and kinship and camaraderie is all about. This is what family is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
No, yeah. But Bill, I want to say once again, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure, man. It's been fun.
And to each and every single one of you out there, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed actually doing this and being here every week for you. That being said and done, peace, blessings, and power. Till next time.